actually a platform where I get to host a conversation with incredible people that are doing amazing things, hopefully that you can learn from some things that they've done or be inspired by them. I'm your host, Luke Gledhill. I run a brand development agency called Just Up the Road, essentially helping brands and companies tell their story, reach their narrative to the end customer or citizen. I also host the 21st Club think tank that brings together people that do good and give back through social and environmental initiatives. So today I'm really excited to have a conversation with Hilary. I'd love to bring our guest in, Hilary.
Hi.
Hi, Hilary. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate having you on today. And do you know what I was thinking before? How we met was so serendipitous in that I feel like I've known you for a long time. We met a week ago on Frecker Farms in Carpinteria. Am I saying that right?
Carpinteria. Well, with your accent.
Okay. And as soon as we met, we just got into a super in-depth conversation about food, about what food can do for you, health-wise, and instantly I just knew that you would be perfect to have on as a conversation and really dive into those sorts of things. So can you tell us who you are and a very brief overview of what you currently do, and we can dive more into it?
Sure. Oh gosh, this is like the hardest part for me because I feel like my story can be kind of long, but I guess the long and the short of it is that I am Hilary Boynton, and I am a holistic health counselor and really saw the power of food as medicine when I healed my son of severe eczema with real food alone. When every doctor said he kind of would have allergies and eczema and asthma, and they just kind of go hand in hand, and it was his lot in life. And I put him on raw milk and cod liver oil through suggestions of friends after trying everything. And boom, he was totally healed. So my eyes opened, I had my aha moment, and just from that point on dove into shouting from the rooftops because I just wanted everybody to have access to farm fresh foods. And this is coming from me who went fat-free in high school and college for like 10 years and really screwed up my system and ended up not being able to have kids at age 26 and had several miscarriages over 3 years, then ended up with triplets and ended up with 5 kids under the age of 4. And my 4th baby had the eczema. And so then when I healed him, I kind of, everything just switched in my life. I just was just like full into real food and finding my local farmers. And I ran an Amish co-op for like 6 years. I lived in Massachusetts at the time. So food trucked in from Pennsylvania from the Amish, like sometimes in the middle of the night, it's kind of underground. And then my husband at the time was, well, I guess, so then I have a daughter with epilepsy, and I started to really research how I could help her with food as well. And we ventured into the GAPS diet, which is the gut and psychology syndrome, so the whole gut-brain connection, and a very healing 2-year protocol. So we went on to that as a family, and I ended up writing a cookbook about that because I felt like there was no real roadmap for moms like me that just wanted to curl up in bed and be empowered with the tools to do this very specific diet. And then my husband at the time, as soon as I handed the book over, was diagnosed with cancer. And so that, again, took things up a notch. And I knew so much about our immune systems and diet and lifestyle and stress and all of those things. So long story short, we ended up picking up and moving across the country to a different way of life, more alternative treatment. And that landed me in California. And he's fine, and he's living. Our marriage didn't quite make it, but he's back in Massachusetts, and he's cancer-free. So that's all great. But I do know the power of disease and how destructive it can be, and takes its toll on families and whatnot. So that's why I'm very, very passionate about prevention and waking people up before they get that frying pan to the head. And so anyway, then we ended up in Topanga after Marina Del Rey, Santa Monica to Topanga. We found this great nature-based school, and they had this great little food program where the kids had like caught their own fish and cooked it that day. And then I was just like, oh, these are my people. And then as the school grew, the food got outsourced and it kind of went downhill. And I had been on this long journey of changing school lunches since my babies were born. And anyway, again, long story short, I worked my way in and just became the snack coordinator, and then outshined the lunch program, and then became the lunch lady. And so for the last 3 years, I've been running the school lunch program at my kids' school, and really have just tried to return the children and the whole community back to ancestral wisdom and traditional methods of cooking, and real food, and just showing up every day, educating them as to what should be considered normal, for not just school food, but how you eat at home and how you treat your body in general in life. So we've had to pivot a little bit since COVID, so I can tell you more about where we are now. But as I became really engrossed in the lunch program and seeing the transformation of the children who would say, I used to be like this all day long, and my blood sugar, they didn't say blood sugar, but you could tell they were feeling like all wonky all day long, and now I feel like this. And teachers saying like, oh my gosh, I'm just so satiated. I'm not hungry for dinner, and what's bone broth, and why do I need it, and what are these fermented foods? I mean, just like the light bulbs were going off. So we ended up starting a lunch leader training academy, where my vision really was to bring people into Topanga, where they could be truly out of their element and reconnected to nature, and understand that we're part of nature, and understand this closed loop system, and then train them to ultimately become knowledgeable about food and food as medicine and how to prepare, but also to become a critical thinker and be able to go back to Maine or Chicago or Atlanta or whatever and scratch the surface in their local food system and dive into whatever they chose, whether it's just to change their household or the school or a hospital or whatever. You don't have to aspire to be a lunch lady, because not everybody wants to be that, but to make a difference in returning us back to local food. So we had a lunch leader training academy last summer, which was super successful, and we've seen all sorts of change. And then this summer it was due to happen again, but then of course it's had to be postponed. So that's sort of where we are now. And then of course we've pivoted again when school became virtual, and started doing meal plan delivery service, so that we could continue to empower people to learn to cook, take control of their own health, stay connected to our farmers and help our farmers. And that's why we met you, because we went out to Frecker Farm to really show, we believe in the storytelling, the behind the scenes of who the farmers are and what they're doing and the work that goes into it. And because I believe when people truly feel connected, then they're more likely to jump in and vote with their dollar and, stand up and take control. So that's, the short version, but it's quite a journey, I must say.
I love it, Hilary, and I love your enthusiasm and passion. It's very infectious, and I can see how you really want to make a change for the good. And I think that that's empowering in a way that, and it's inspirational in a way that if you think that something isn't right, and that or have knowledge and education in how you can make things better for people, that is essentially better for them and their families and their communities, I can see that is what you want to do. You want to help make that change. So there's a lot to unpack from what you've said, but following on, why do you think that we are, as a society, so disconnected when it comes to food? I've had many conversations about this with incredible people, and I'd love your perspective on it as well.
Well, I think we've just gone, it's almost like there's just been too much information and too much misinformation that everybody is completely confused. And so they don't, they blow with the wind. There's a movie about this, so I think I'll go that way. And we've, over the course of the last 100 years or so, kind of our health has just gone downhill as we've gone farther away from traditional foods, and more processed foods have come into play. And also, you can't dismiss that often there's both mom and dad are working now, so convenience has become huge. But as things have become so convenient, and busy, life is just so busy that we've lost sight of the importance of and the simplicity of just real food and how to properly nourish your body, because it doesn't have to be complicated, but there's just so much confusion. I think we've gotten to the point where everyone's so ultimately so out of balance. I mean, some people are more sick than others, but I just heard the stat that 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. So it's just massive. And so these kids now are growing up with no recollection of how things used to be, or how their great grandparents ate or how to cook. It's just it's so processed and their taste buds have been hijacked. And of course, like, that's what I really truly appreciate about the school where I teach and cook, is that it is a nature-based school. So they really do work hard to reconnect the kids to nature. And I think that's totally missing in our society. I said to the head of school, I was like, we need your voice now more than ever. Like, you're one of the only pioneers, like, that are truly leading the way and reconnecting our kids to nature. So we just have no, I think, most adults too just really are so disconnected from our surroundings and realizing that we are part of nature. And just as, like, you look at something in nature like a butterfly or a beautiful flower or a vegetable, whatever, and you're like, God, it's so amazing. If we were to unzip ourselves and have that same appreciation for how magnificent we are and how truly all these systems work all day, every day, and we don't give it any thought until we have to all of a sudden when we're sick and we're like, oh shoot, something's not working. But it's important to understand the internal microbiome and the external the biome and the viome and the health of the topsoil, and all of that is so important. When you understand that true closed loop system and that we're part of it, then I think we can move forward. But as we continue to disconnect, it's just like the swirling just keeps going on.
Yeah, I think one of the words that stood out when you said was convenience. I think that the culture or society has been led in a way that we're led to believe that convenience is best for us. And as you were talking about, if both parents are working and comes to the end of the day, what do they want? And that is convenience. And I live in the heart of Los Angeles, so I'm very aware that at the touch of a button on my phone, I can instantly have any cuisine from anywhere in the world delivered straight to my door. And I don't know where those ingredients were grown, what ingredients were used in that product or that meal. I don't know whether that's nutritionally good for me. And I think a lot of people have potentially kind of switched off that thinking part of their brain that questions that. And while it tastes good, so I'm going to, shove it in my face, as opposed to really connecting and thinking about it. Something also that I thought, as you were speaking, during everything that's happened, I had a message from a friend who's a high-end real estate broker in Los Angeles. And this was a couple of months ago now. And he said that his pace of life had slowed down that much that he didn't want to go back to what it was before. And obviously, being a high-end realtor, he's very fast paced. It's deals, and he's a single guy as well. So I can understand the lifestyle he was in. And it's given him the opportunity to realize, well, actually, slow is good. And as you mentioned about what our ancestors or great grandparents, how they used to live their life, there's something that is to be said about that kind of pace. And I'm not saying that life can or should be at that pace all the time, but it's about finding that balance. And something that I really felt the first time last week at the farm, and we went back again yesterday and then visited another farm, it was the peace and the energy of the land and the area and the farm and the people that were working there and the farm owner as well. Yeah. I felt that at both farms, and they were very different farms. And one of the things that Alex, our friend, said to me before we left is it really comes down to education.
Totally. And I think, when you're connected to the land and things aren't so instantaneous, right? You have to wait for a seed to become a zucchini or a fruit or whatever, right? And so with technology now, especially I may see with my kids, it's like I'm managing all the time, the technology and what they're eating, right? So as parents, it's really exhausting to have to manage some things that didn't used to have to be managed. It was just like, this is our way of life. There was not this, constant this thing at the fingertips of everybody, and everything wasn't as accessible. And I think you made a really good point about, yes, things are convenient, but at what price? And that's where I think the lack of education, people do not understand that in most every takeout you're getting rancid vegetable oils that are just changing this cellular structure in our bodies. And they don't know what those are, right? So that, people are afraid of fat, and they don't know which fats are good and which fats are bad. And that's so confusing, and it's so important. Then I see kids wanting to save the environment, and so they're going to give up meat, but they don't really then understand what nutrition like they do need and how they're going to feed their growing brains and growing bodies, and how they're going to replace that if that's possible. So there's all these extremes, and it's like I said, it's almost just like this big swirling mess. So when you land on a farm and you slow down, you have that chance to just like tap in and you feel that, then I think you crave that, right? So that's why it's so important to reconnect our kids and ourselves. Like the Manzanita School brought nature connection to me too, doing sit spots and, just being in nature and observing and understanding it all. It's kind of baffling, but at the same time, like sometimes I'm like, I can't believe people like open a bag of like hot, what are those things called? Those hot Cheetos or hot, they're like fire engine red. And I'm like, how could they think those are good for them? But then I think back to my fat-free days, like all I did was look at the fat and I was like, oh, I can have it. There's 0 fat. So there was just this lack of education, but it used to just be infused into you with what your family culture was, right? And somebody said that the other day about COVID and how dangerous it is because it's different from like, because we have epidemics of like cancer and heart disease and diabetes, and they're like, well, COVID's different because you can give it to somebody. And then this doctor made the point that like, well, really, you can, like when we're passing on culture, this culture of like processed crap, we're giving our children disease. We're just pushing them right into the medical system. And I keep trying to wake parents up that we are the only people between our children and the medical system. So if we don't wake up and slow down, and I think a lot of parents are feeling like that right now, like, oh my God, this is kind of nice. Even I was like, I don't know if I want to go back to work. It's going to have to be this. And I'm very interested in unpacking how you get people to the psychology of getting people to wake up before they have to.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think I don't know how I ended up down this rabbit hole recently, but I discovered, I think it was in 2015 and then updated in 2017, there's 100 million people in the US that have diabetes. And right. And it's incredible. And I'll make this one comment and I'll leave it at that. But essentially, there are no solutions. I couldn't find the solutions. And I found a solution from a health organization that is very well known around the world. And their solution was so baffling to me. And I don't even have diabetes, so I don't need to know. But I would feel hopeless and not empowered to really know of how to make a change and a difference. And that's why I think that it's so important, people like yourself, as a holistic health wellness advocate, I think it's really important that these conversations take place. People listen to any piece of information, take that away, they can then think for themselves and then actually understand, well, this might not be good for me or my children or for my family. And one thing that I really find interesting is the blue zones. And I watched a TV documentary about Sardinia and how, I think you and I spoke about it last week, essentially how they have the highest amount of centurion people in a small area. And the reasoning behind that is not necessarily super focused on the foods that they eat, but it's the whole environment that they live their life in, right? It's family orientated. All of the family are in together, making food together, sat down at a table. It's actually a part of their day. It's a part of their life, as opposed to counterculture here, where grab and go something, eat it in the car between meetings or whatever, it's a completely different way of life.
Yeah, it's just not fulfilling. And I do agree. That's why with our School of Lunch and all of our training, we have this side of it that's called regen living, because it's not just food. I don't want people to think food fixes everything, although it's foundational. It should be, food first as medicine, I think. And that you need sunshine, you need sleep, you need laughter and community and time spent to decompress around the family table. You need that nourishment. And it's a nourishment on a different level than just food. It's that human connection. And so, when we're isolated, it's just, I just heard the other day, I think it was Zach Bush who was saying, I forget how he said it too, but like when you isolate anything, it creates chaos, right? So, as humans, when we're isolated and we're just, go, it's so chaotic. And I think we're all feeling that right now. That's why I would, if I could say one thing, it's like, now is the time. I really feel like you can go kind of into despair, like what's happening? Or it's like, wow, this is our moment, right? This is like, if we can just step into that hope and that joy, and that like, this would never have happened. I mean, yes, of course we don't want loss of life, but I look at it as an opportunity where it is ultimately that frying pan to the head for all of us. Like, wow, I have an immune system and I have control over it, or I can nourish it. I mean, people don't know what that is. And so for all of the people watching, I do want to say I have seen diabetes and disease, autoimmune disease, eczema, infertility, all those things reverse, and certainly preventable. So I think if people can grasp the concept of just, you don't have to be sick. You're not destined, your genes are not your destiny. You're not destined to get, cancer or whatever, just because that's the way life is. Or my mom had diabetes, so I'm going to be diabetic. No, you're, I truly believe in epigenetics, and that they say your genes load the gun, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger. So I think that's a really good metaphor, in that, you just, so much comes into it. And I think living a happy, fulfilled life is in a connected life. And when you can let go of worry and stress and realize that, when we're forced to slow down right now, we kind of realize that like all those things that you thought are so important, that you have to get them done on time, that if you just let it go, that it's still okay. And I think everyone's sort of feeling like it's okay if I let go because everybody's let go, or it's okay if I'm not working my ass off right now because, like everyone's in the same position. So it's sort of comforting that we have this moment to breathe and rethink things. But it's a moment that we have to be very careful, I think, because we could easily go back and say, oh, yay, now I can go get all my convenience foods and whatever, and life is back to normal. Or we can shift and take this time to learn how to cook and reevaluate. We have to.
Yeah. Everything about that. I love, Hilary. Talk to me about the microbiome and gut and how that works in your system with regards to your brain. I've done a lot of reading about this. You probably know a lot more than me, but the fact that the gut, some people say your gut is your second brain, but then some people say it's actually your first brain because of how that works. Can you expand a bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think your immune system, the headquarters is right in your gut. And so to realize that we have good and bad bacteria all the time within us, right? We're made up of gazillions of bacteria. So to first of all realize that, and that it's okay, is liberating, and you don't have to stress about it. But also that I guess the best way that it clicked for me, because I'm always the one that I'm like, we're not really science brain, so I kind of try and be in layman's terms. I think of that when a baby goes through the birth canal, they swallow a big gulp of what is their first inoculation of bacteria in their microbiomes. So if you imagine the moms today versus our great grandmothers, what the balance of their microbiomes was like compared to now. I mean, if you think about environmental toxins and vaccinations and antibiotics and processed foods and stress and all the things that take their toll on our microbiomes. The moms today are, when I wrote my book, the average cord blood had 287 toxins in the cord blood alone. Then the baby goes through the birth canal, if they're lucky enough to have a vaginal delivery, and they swallow this big gulp of bacteria, which is not as diverse as it used to be. So they're getting, inherited poor gut flora, and then they get, slammed with a vaccination or an ear infection, and they get antibiotics, which wipes out everything. And so just all these invaders that come in and disrupt the balance. And so you have these beautiful villi and the intestinal lining that just keep getting shaved down when the bad bacteria starts to outweigh the good. And eventually they create cracks in the lining. So everything that goes in your mouth is supposed to go in one end and out the other, but they seep out into the bloodstream, and your body sees them as foreign and launches an autoimmune response. So they attack. Usually that's when you attack your own body, or they can cross the blood-brain barrier and cause psychological issues. So it's just really important for me too, for these young kids to understand the power that they have of rebalancing now before they have children, to set this next generation up with a better chance at least, and to just be knowledgeable about, like my kids had an ear infection. I had triplets, my first babies, and I was like, I just was that mom that like didn't know anything, and I just trusted and was like, what do I do? And boom, like just gave him antibiotics. And I was lucky to have a holistic practitioner too that just said, you don't need to do, like, you can think, you can wait, you can see if it clears up on its own. So to have like someone to hold your hand with that, I think is so key. And for people to understand the quick Band-Aid effects of things, but the long-term side effects, so you have to stop as a parent and like just stop and check in and say, before you just jump. Like my son got a splinter in his foot, and I took him to the hospital because he wasn't going to let me get it out. And they're like, well, we can't take it out, but here's some antibiotics and some crutches. And I'm like, you're going to give him antibiotics for a splinter? And like, I soaked it, and boom, it popped out the next day and was like healed right over. But if I had just given him the antibiotics, with no idea of how to heal his gut, it just seems crazy. So anyway, so the microbiome is so, it's so diverse and so much a part of who we are. And if we don't think about how everything we put in our body, whether it be psychological or ingested or injected, we really have to think. And every single person is different. So you can't say what works for one is going to work for another. And one baby's going to react this way and one baby's going to react that way. So
I think also to add on top, and you can probably speak a bit more about this, what I find interesting is that food has energies, right? Mm-hmm. And vibrations, and the lower vibration, the lower energy food is essentially processed food. It's man-made food versus higher vibration or higher energy foods, which is straight from the land, from an organically or regeneratively grown food. And what you essentially will put into your body, into your system through your gut is going to have a difference on your mental health and mental state of being, right?
Yeah, I think with the processed foods, we're just constantly bombarding our bodies with unfamiliar, unrecognizable foods. I can't even call it nutrition. It's just, I don't know what it is. Some of it is just, and especially like I look at the school food that's being served across the country, and I'm like, it's really, so you have to think like, people say like, if God didn't make it, or if your great grandmother didn't have it, then like, it's not something that belongs in your body. So it seems like common sense, but we've just gone so far off the deep end. But yeah, it's absolutely 100% connected to how you feel. For me to have that little 6th grader say, I used to feel like this all day long. And then he's getting like, totally nutrient dense, power packed snack and lunch. I have his stomach for 6 hours. And he's just like, I just now feel like this. He doesn't know anything about blood sugar or whatever. So, I don't think most people know what it feels like to feel good. Most people are walking around just feeling crappy, but they don't, that's their normal. So if we can get those cells turned on and people are like, wow, like I'm not bloated, or, oh my gosh, I'm not constipated, or, there's so many, or my brain fog, or, there's just so many effects. And I wish more people right now were screaming from the rooftops, like, let's get healthy, America, or, to the globe. Like, this is truly so, so important.
There's something I wanted to read in regards to your book, the Heal Your Gut Cookbook. I really love this. It's on your website. It says that your goal is to arm you with the food knowledge of our ancestors and to give you encouragement to allow your body to be your guide on this healing journey. It knows the way back to health. Yeah. And I think that can go for, ourselves, our body, but also the environment as well. Intuitively, everything knows the way back to health, but it's how you perceive to really follow that or not.
And we're so resilient. Like, if I think about how I treated my body in my teens and 20s, I'm surprised I'm alive, and then to be able to come back to homeostasis is miraculous, right? But I've given an example before. The head of school, we were up on this big camping trip up in the redwoods, and he was just like, look at these redwoods to the kids. They're just miraculous. And at the base of every redwood are billions of microbes keeping it all, healthy and strong. And I was just like watching him, and I'm like, you are a redwood. Like, you're no different than any, like at your base, there's just like billions of microbes keeping you. They're working all day, every day, keeping you healthy and strong. But so, like, just as we wouldn't go around to that redwood and like pour a little gasoline around it every day, why are we putting basically gasoline into our own bodies and expecting, health? We know that the tree would die eventually. So it's sort of like, that's where that disconnect is. Like, we're no different. And then he said, I want all of you kids to go around and pick up all the little micro trash, which is just like any teeny tiny pieces of whatever that weren't there when we got there. We want to leave it as clean or cleaner for the next people to come in. So then I thought about that, and I thought, okay, so like if we didn't pick up our micro trash, the next group might not notice it. But if they left their micro trash and the next group, then it would eventually build up and people would be like, this place is gross. So it takes time and it builds up. And then it's just like, the tree dies, or the place is gross, or the oceans are polluted. And so that's where we are now. But it's amazing how rapidly things can change. Charles Eisenstein says, I don't know if you know him, but he wrote a book called The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. And it's a beautiful book, but he says I hope I get this right, but when humanity comes together for a common cause, phenomenally rapid change can happen. So if we can just like wake up right now, I think things can happen very quickly, right? Very quickly. And your things can unwind. I always say to people, you didn't get there overnight, so you can't expect people want to do a 10-day juice fast or something and expect that everything is going to be back to normal. Like, it takes time, right? But to be patient, I think it's the biggest gift you can give to yourself or your children is to just to decide that you want to be healthy, right? I say in my book, the hardest part about this gut healing protocol is deciding to do it. Once you decide, you're like, okay, I'm in. But that I don't know, it's so intense, but it's a blip. It's a blip in your life to just spend a little time focusing on rebalancing. And then you go.
I had a great conversation on one of these episodes with a chap who lost a lot of weight. And as you were talking then, it made me think. I asked him, why do you think it is that people are happy, not necessarily happy, sorry, that's the wrong word, but why do you think it is that people just allow this to be their state and of suffering, essentially, if they're overweight or they have health issues, instead of the logical thing would be to take control. But so many people are just stuck in this state that they're in because they're scared of change. They're scared of essentially what could happen for good. And they would rather keep keep in that state?
Well, I think an important point too is that people are addicted, right? These food companies are very dangerous in that they target, they can lace every single side of the Dorito to tantalize every single side of your taste buds or whatever, and make you crave that. And when your gut is out of balance, your bad bacteria just is like this animal inside of you and can make people, like I had somebody ping me a couple of years ago, like, I just like woke up in the middle of the night and ate like a whole sleeve of Girl Scout cookies and some Ritz crackers, and I was just like, oh my God, like I can't even imagine. But it's like this uncontrollable. And another mom said to me, her husband goes and like drives out in the middle of the night to get ice cream. But it's that they need the sugar, they need the that glucose is like what's feeding those bad bacteria. And so it's very hard to break that habit, right? And I just think habits are so critical. So setting our children up with proper habits is so key. But I also see it's so difficult as a parent, and we are up against, even with my own children, they go off and I've taught them, it's like coming from me, and it's been like their whole lives. I'm like, why would you eat that? And they still do sometimes. I'm like, why would you do that? But not to shame them, but I'm like, that's terrible for you. But and I was like that. I was invincible, and you kind of probably have to go off the rails a little bit, but hopefully then you return to what you know to be proper and true and good for you. But part of that is pushing up against authority too, I think. But it's unfortunate because the big food companies are just really, from a marketing standpoint, it's unjust what happens and what's being fed to our children at schools. Sometimes breakfast and lunch, a lot of kids, like one of our lunch leaders that's in Chicago, like 95% of her children are on free and reduced lunch. And so the majority of their food in the day is just processed junk. So how do we expect them to learn and to grow and to, feel good? It's terrible.
I think that leads back to essentially a lot of the work that you do, Hilary, really, that you have the passion and empower people and teachers and children with the knowledge that you have. So let's go back up. I want to hear some more about essentially currently what it is you're doing with the school lunches. You mentioned briefly. Talk a bit more about that.
Well, so now, gosh, I'm like, it's kind of making my brain explode, but we're not quite sure if we're going back virtually or if like half the school will go back to the campus. They've designed an outdoor living classroom, which I think is pretty epic for these kids to truly be in nature and not having to sit behind a computer screen all day or, in a classroom with a mask or whatever. But I don't know if it will fully happen yet, but kudos to them for trying. But with the lunches, the school, I just had a conversation a couple of days ago or maybe it was yesterday, that, we do still really want to be able to continue to educate and to nourish the community, regardless of whether or not they're at school or at home. So it's super important. And so we're trying to figure out how we can supply, but it's like I was saying to you before, it's feeding a third grader is quite different than feeding a high schooler. So I don't quite know how we're going to solve that problem, but at least we have SOL boxes, which are School of Lunch. So SOL boxes, which is this meal plan delivery service where you get meals delivered straight to your door that have a recipe, and it's all the stories and the information about the farmers. So you're connected to your farmers. You have just the ingredients that you need. It's basically designed to be very minimal waste. So you don't get like 50 carrots if you only need 2. And then you're able to, easily put together some meals and sit around the table and enjoy that time with your family. So now we're trying to figure out the SOL school lunch box where we can supply at least the basics, and then they can add in stuff. And but it's beautiful. So I hope it sparks in people. Like, when you look at somebody, you watch some YouTuber, and you're like, oh man, I want to be like that, or I want to do that. I want people to be so lit up by the beauty and the story and the taste and the simplicity that they're just like, this, I can do this. And I want that. I want to be vibrant and healthy. I don't want to be thinking about my health every day, like as a struggle. I want my kids to be set up. I mean, I think that's the most important thing for a parent, is to realize you're not loving your kids by, making it fun and exciting and with like Gatorade and candy after soccer practice. And it's not about shame. It's just about that waking up. Like, what feels good about that, right? The kids are happy because they're like, woohoo, sugar, but it's in speaking from a mom that's had kids that suffer, there's nothing worse than being a mom and watching your child suffer. So if you can decide that you're going to make a commitment, and that our ancestors did it for millennia, right? I mean, we've always just been participating with nature and with the animals and with the land, and we need to get back to that. We have to, or else our children are not gonna, this is a first generation of kids that's not supposed to outlive their parents. So it's really like fact. I mean, I have over 10 friends that I've lost in their 40s, early 50s to disease. So it's too young, and it didn't have to be that way. And all the money, to throw at things, but not ultimately winning in the end. So, it's just time to make that choice. And I think the more we can create the groundswell and get people excited about it, then it becomes the norm. But when you're that only person out there who's like fringe and the freak and the extremist, like, it's like no fun. I've been there for way too long.
Well, yeah.
I'm like, come on, join the tribe.
I was just going to say, Hilary, I don't think you are on your own anymore. I think there is a lot of people out there that advocate for the same thing that you do. And I think one of the important things is, as you were talking, you mentioned about taste and about food. And I was thinking, I can see the change that you are making, because if you can infuse the thoughts into people's minds, whether it's the children or the parents, through taste, that lights up something different in your brain. And layer on top, going back to the educational part, which is something you're really good at doing, I think those two things combined can really make a difference. And I've had this conversation so many times with people that I believe food is the way forward in a lot of things, in health, in mental health, physical health, well-being, community. I really, truly believe it is. And I think you're leading the way with that, with everything that you're trying to do with education and the food side, with schools and lunch boxes. Tell me a bit more about the educational part, because you mentioned before we jumped on this call that you briefly mentioned about the summer camp last year, and you're doing some things now where you're helping to educate other people in different cities as well.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, first of all, I think the education for the kids, because we're so disconnected, it's going to take a lunch leader showing up, several of them every day, engaging with the kids, lovingly preparing the food, talking to them about it in a loving way. They know, when people know that things were prepared with intention and grown and raised with intention, and it tastes delicious, that's felt on a cellular level. So I was thinking, like, after COVID hit and I was like no longer the lunch lady, I'm like, you know what? If I was just the lunch lady for like 3 years, I think all of those kids would really, like, one day look back and be like, you know what, I had a cool lunch lady, or like, she at least really cared about us, and she, was always there to answer questions, or, all of my people that work with me too, like, we all remember our lunch ladies, right? So, and now we have lunch leaders, because there's, of course, lots of men who are interested in this as well. And so we started the Lunch Leader Training Academy. And yes, had people from Maine to Atlanta to Chicago, all over come, and we had a full-on week immersion where we stayed in Topanga at this beautiful retreat. So they're like deep in the Topanga canyons and the mountains, and just so surrounded by nature. And then we were able to go to the farmers market and introduce them to farmers, and we were able to go to Belcampo Butcher Shop, where we showed them how properly raised meats, are broken down, and that you can use lesser cuts of meats, how to make a bone broth, to try just to expose them to really honoring the animals. So I think that's a huge thing in our culture right now, as people are so confused whether to eat meat or not, to not eat meat. But I think ultimately the most important thing is to know where your food comes from and how it was raised, and that you hold space for that, right? And have gratitude that somebody lovingly raised this animal. And yes, there was a life lost for your, for you to gain nutrition from that. And so when you understand that closed loop system and you can honor that, then I think it's okay. But when there's just this huge disconnect, of course, with, that food just shows up on the grocery store shelves and there's no idea that a life was lost or whatnot, then that's where it doesn't translate, right? If you're a lunch leader and you don't understand that and really honor that, then you're not going to be able to pass that to our kids. And our kids don't have any connection to the animals. So I think that's super important. And then we had intense cooking classes and training at this big farm in Malibu, where we really brought them back to fermented foods and how to roast meats and slow roast meats, and make bone broths, and just how to really make things beautiful and enticing, and to work together. I mean, it's such a beautiful thing. I mean, food really is beautiful, and how to engage the kids. There's a guy, a friend of mine, Sandeep Agarwal, who runs Pure Indian Foods Ghee, and this has been they've been producing ghee for generations in his family. And he said, Hilary, children were always involved in the preparation of meals in the household, or just the raising of the food. I mean, they always all had jobs, and it was part of it. So I think when you just show up and sit down at a table and you expect food to come at you, then that's again where we're just spoiled, right? We're just with this convenience and expectations that, we're so incredibly lucky, right, to even just have a choice as to what we want to eat, right? So so with the training academy, we've trained several people across the country and seen them go back into the principal in Chicago, where 95 of the kids are free and reduced. They're trying to privatize the lunch program, so say no to government subsidies and cook from scratch in there and get that started, or maybe start a nonprofit where they can somehow collaborate with the schools. But they're getting ignited and wanting to make the change. And I think we have to start coming from our heart space, that when you look at something and you say, that's just not right. It doesn't belong going into a child's body. And regardless of money and the walls that are, in front of us, we have to break them down and figure out a way. There has to be a better way, because otherwise we're going to spend our entire lives taking care of sick children. And we're not going to go on. We're not going to move forward the way we want to. And it's staggering, the statistics. 54% of our children already have a chronic disease. So, and that's not even soft diagnoses. That's already. So it's really time for that wake up call. It's really just and I want it to not be daunting, but hopeful. Let's just do it. Right? You in?
Right. I'm in. I'm all in, Hilary. I could speak with you for hours and hours. Hilary, before we wrap this up, I'd like to ask one last thing. You've given so many gems in this conversation so far, but is there one thing for anybody watching or listening that they could take immediately to implement into their life for good?
Well, I would say the bottom line, oh God, there's so many things, but I think even just the decision to turn to real food, just real food. Do the best you can, buy what you can afford, and cook real food. And learn to cook. Actually, that might be it. Decide to learn to cook, because just by simply taking over that process and understanding how to stash your pantry with healthy, fats and stuff like that, you're doing your family a world of service. I mean, just like you said, to just even being around the family dinner table. I often say it's not always beautiful, but at least it's homemade. And I mean, there's been tears, there's been punching, there's been everything at our family dinner table. But I hope that, just that we were always together will remain, as a solid foundation for my kids, and that we cooked, right? And I can say my daughter's all the way across the country, and yesterday I like walked her through on the phone. I'm like, you can cook your own roasted chicken. And so she's like, calling me up. Okay, so now I have this. I've gone to the grocery store. She's 16, and she was so proud of herself. She fed 6 people, roasted chicken, roasted vegetables, made a salad. She made her own salad dressing because I was like, you don't want the soybean oil and the canola. And so empower your kids and empower yourself and have fun with it. It is really fun. It's creative and fun and beautiful. So anyway, sorry, that was like a mouthful, but.
No, that was perfect, Hilary. Perfect. Before we go, tell us where people can find your book and find more about you as well.
So my book is the Heal Your Gut Cookbook, and that's on Amazon. I think we still have our website, but if you go to Live Yum Yum, LIVEYUMYUM on Instagram, the link in the bio has my book and the Lunch Leader Training Academy. And then mysoulbox.com is where people, if you're in LA, this is where you can we're just signing a lease. So we're like, hopefully in the next month or so, be up and boom, getting farm fresh foods and empowering people. And it's not about just being this elite thing either. This is about waking people up so that we can all put our minds together and figure out how everybody can have access to this. So, and hospitals, we're working with hospitals as well. So it's super exciting. So if you go to Live Yum Yum, then all the links are in the bio.
Fantastic. Hilary, you're inspiring, you're empowering. I've loved this conversation. I love your energy, and I can't wait to carry the conversation on with you again sometime.
Yes, more farm visits, and we got to get together. We got to get you guys over for dinner. I want to have a little DJ party with you.
Okay, it's on. I'll bring the music.
Awesome. Okay. Thank
you, Hilary.
Appreciate it. You guys are doing
Very
great.
Grateful. Very grateful. Thank you. Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Wow. Hilary is an incredible leader in the work she does, especially with regards to school children and really empowering children and teachers to eat more healthier, to avoid any diseases or issues with health. I think we can all learn a lot from her, and I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. I'll be back again next week, so I'll see you soon. Thanks.